Hello, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it happens to be for you. It's good to see you all. I am here in lovely Italy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Today I want to talk about something that is for me a very near and dear to my heart, how to delegate, right? So for me, I was a bit of a control freak, to put it mildly, and learning how to delegate was a massive thing for me. So if you're struggling to delegate, let's start with reframing it. It's not about losing control, right? We're learning how to create capacity, how to create trust, how to train someone else to step into a leadership role, or at least a management role, right? So we're gonna look at some things that happened in my life that helped me to kind of shift into helping someone else, and I'll share some other stories of some of my clients that have been able to also shift into that delegation is losing control to no, I'm creating this capacity, okay? So hi everybody, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If you're joining me today, hi in the comments. If you're live, drop a live in the comments for me. If you're here on the replay, drop a hashtag replay. I'd love to hear where you're from. Please share that with me because it's always fascinating to me where everybody comes from. Let me know. Okay, so today is one that I feel that every leader really needs to understand, to learn, to embrace, and to hear over and over again, right? We're talking about delegation, not in the traditional corporate kind of sense, the traditional delegate, I'm going to give the stuff I don't want to you, but really talk about empowered delegation, right? It's a slightly different energy. Think about that. I'm going to delegate to you because I don't want to do this, so this is now your job, or empowered delegation, right? The kind that builds trust, builds character, empowers people, it builds people up, it builds their capacity to be able to step into different kinds of roles. It expands their capacity, which also in turn expands yours instead of shrinking, okay? Let's talk about why. First of all, why it feels hard sometimes to want to delegate. Let's be honest. Sounds good in theory, right? I always thought, I'm just going to hand stuff off to people. But in practice, it's really hard. And it can be very uncomfortable. For some of us, we have deep-seated control kinds of issues. Yep, I am one of those people. Some of us, we have fears that, if we give something to someone else, it's going to somehow reflect back on us because they didn't do it right. What if I hand something to them and they're better than me? Oh my gosh, right? Well, what I realized is that it's all about how we delegate, right? And if you've been burned by trusting someone, that doesn't feel that they didn't follow through with something, that fear that you feel can feel justified, right? So if you've tried to delegate, notice I use the word tried to delegate something to someone, and they somehow dropped the ball in some way, shape, or form, and it came back and burned you in some way, shape, or form, then it feels justified to be afraid to delegate again. But here's what I've learned as a leader, a coach, and someone who's done a lot of healing work around control and trust. Delegation isn't about losing control, right? It's about transferring trust with clarity, okay? It's a transfer of trust with clarity. You have to be very clear about what the expectations are, okay? It's a mindset shift, right? It changes the way you look at it. And if you look at it as an empowerment tool for both of you, then, right, it's a completely different kind of mindset thing. So let me share with you a story from a few years ago. I had an office manager. He was fairly new to the company. He came with a lot of experience, brilliant guy. He was hardworking. He was a bit socially awkward, but he really wanted that management position. His strong suit was not stepping in. He thought he was really good at connecting, but I got word back from the team that he was just kind of awkward. So what I ended up doing is we had a company-wide meeting. People were flying in from all over the country, and normally I'd be in the middle of every detail that was going on. I would have been handling everything, or Janet and I together would have been handling anything and everything. And we were also bringing in a coach to help build trust amongst the team and to really kind of create a different kind of communication going on. It's like the parent who wants to teach something to their child, but then they don't do it at home, but then they go to someone else's house and they do it. Okay, it can be like that in the business place too. I use coaches all the time. We were bringing in a coach. What I did is I asked him to make the arrangements, my manager, to work with the coach, to work with Janet, to set everything up. And the only thing that I asked of him is that he present the plan to me before finalizing everything. And I wanted to know why he made the decisions that he made. I wanted to know what his mindset was for doing certain things. So that was the only thing, is he could plan everything, but at the end he needed to share with me his thought process in getting from A to B to C to D. When we reviewed it, there were a lot of things that I would have done differently. I'm not gonna lie, right? But instead of making the changes, I let him run with it. There were a few tweaks, a few minor tweaks that I was like, well, have you thought about this? Or did you consider that? But again, it's like I let him kind of run with it. Was it perfect? No. Was it good? Yes. Right. And it was kind of his process. He and Janet worked together with the coach to make this happen. They were very pleased with it. In fact, the team was very pleased with it. So he grew more from that project than he did in probably everything else that we worked on together the previous 6 months, because I trusted. It was a transfer of trust, and he stepped into that ownership. The team started to see him in a different light, right? That empowerment, right? By stepping back away from the micromanaging and the control, I was empowering him and allowing him to build his capacity. It comes from a place of trust. Taught me something that I'll never forget. Delegation isn't losing control, right? It's creating capacity. So some 3 keys to empower delegation. 3 things that made that experience a success, and things that you can start using right away. So first, clarity before control. Be clear about the income, or not every single step, right? Just know this is the end goal. This is what the expectation is at the end of the project, right? So people rise to the occasion if you give them the opportunity to do so. I said, this is my end goal. This is what I want to create. Make it happen, right? So he worked with Janet, my marketing director, and our coach, and they made that happen, right? Step 2, ask for reasoning, okay? Ask for the reason, the thought process behind things. Because, right, we have a way of thinking that we're like, okay, this is what I would do, this is why I would do it, this is how I would do it. But other people have different ways of approaching things, right? And sometimes their way is better, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just different. In order to understand why they made a certain choice that they made, you gain a lot of insight from their thinking, and you just might learn a thing or two from it, right? So then you get to coach the mindset, not just the task. Because if their mindset, so like in the case of this young man, he had a certain thought process, and I was like, that's not quite what I was thinking when I asked you to do this. This is actually more what I was thinking, right? So I got to share with him my reasoning as well for what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. So it allowed me to get more clear about my expectation. It allowed him to ask questions. So there was some back and forth when we went through the plan at the end. And at the end of the day, I didn't let him run with it pretty much the way he wanted. Once he had some clarity from me, he was able to make some tweaks and then go from there. So ask for reasoning, not perfection, by the way, doesn't happen. Perfection is an excuse to procrastinate. I'm going to throw that out there. That's a whole nother live altogether, but just keep it in mind. If you're expecting perfection, it's an excuse to blame, shame, guilt. It's an excuse to procrastinate. Don't go there, okay? Get the reasoning and go with that. Reflect, don't rescue, okay? So we have the urge, especially when we're control freaks, so those of you who have that tendency, and if you're in your own business or you're stepped into a leadership, you probably have a little bit of tendency for that. Resist the urge to jump in and rescue. Resist the urge to jump in, change everything because it doesn't look the way you expect it to look. Sit down and reflect together. What would you do differently? What's your thought process around why you're doing this way, why you did that way? Right? So stop and do some reflection even prior to, like when I asked him to bring me the plan, we did some reflection prior to, right? And then afterwards we sat down again and said, okay, what worked, what didn't work, why, what would you do differently, and then do you have questions of me? He was like, what would you have done differently? I was able to provide him some honest answer and honest feedback to that. And that's where real growth happens, right? That's where real growth happens, because you have that time to reflect, to think about, to share this back and forth reasoning, then growth for both of you. I learned some things, he learned some things. It was a really good process. With that, I'd love to know, what do you find the most difficult thing to delegate in your business or in your leadership capacity? Drop the word in the thing here, the DMs, there we go, in the chat. Let me know, is it control? Is it trust? Is it time? Because delegation can also take time, right? Delegating something to someone else is to save time, but in order to get the clarity, it also requires time. It requires some time from you in order to set up the project and say, this is what I'm expecting, this is why I expect it, here are some key things that you need to understand, and to have the back and forth if they have some questions. So it does take time. Now, once you get somebody empowered to that place, it saves time, but it takes time to save, just like it takes money to save money, right? Or make money, I guess. Takes money to make money, right? It takes time to save time, right? So this week, I want to challenge you to pick one thing that you've been holding on to in your business or in your leadership and delegate it, okay? But do it with, right? So take the time to really figure out what is the end goal, right? What are the key outcomes that you want? What is the one or two or maybe three key outcomes that you expect out of this when you hand something over to someone else? Right? Give some reasoning behind it, ask for reasoning from them about some of the decisions that they've made, and then sit back and trust. Be available, hello, control freaks, we tend to do that, and then come back here and tell me, what you learned from the experience. Was it scary? Was it empowering? At the end of the day, did you feel empowered having, helped empower somebody else? Because it's an incredible feeling. Was it a relief for you to be able to delegate that thing to someone else? Right? So, and come back and let me know. I'd love to know what it was that you opted to delegate to someone else. At the end of the day, right, as leaders, we often think that we know more than we do. The more that we know, the more that we're worth. Okay, so I'm going to share, I was working with somebody who really struggled with delegation because of worthiness, right? So worthiness was an issue for this person and felt there was a lot of fear that if she handed stuff off to somebody else, that she would be seen as incapable of doing her job because she was handing something off to someone else. But after working with her a little bit, she could see what the value was in helping somebody else also improve and increase their capacity, which then in turn allowed her to take on and go more in depth with other things that made more sense. She wanted to go more in depth in this area of her career, and so she needed to let go of a couple of things in order to go more in depth. Now, it took a couple months for everything to kind of even out for her and her to be able to set things off and do the delegation, the back and forth conversation with people so that there was a proper clarity, for the reasoning, for them to, both sides, to be comfortable, right? Once at the end of the day it was all done, she was like, wow, right? So not only did she feel worthy because now she had more depth in an area capacity of her own, she also felt because she had empowered somebody else, and in doing so she felt empowered by empowering someone else. Hope that makes sense. So true leadership really isn't about doing it all ourselves. It's about developing somebody else's capacity so that we can go deeper into what we truly love and what we are good at, best want to do more of, right? When you delegate with confidence, when you delegate with clarity, you're multiplying your capacity, not just getting it done, right? But you're also developing who gets it done, who gets to grow in the process. Right, so she chose this person, right? I chose this person. And so you choose somebody based on their skill set, right? You choose them based on their skill sets. You delegate it. You want to grow those skill sets. Then support each other in a higher capacity, right? So hopefully today's message, if today's message resonated with you, share the video, tag somebody who you think would really appreciate this, who's learning to trust, who's learning to lead with trust, who's wanting to let go a little bit more control and maybe just needs a little bit of encouragement. And next time we're going to go a little bit deeper. We'll talk about how to maintain alignment when conflict arises, right? Because empowerment doesn't mean everything goes smoothly, as we know, right? It just means that you get to learn how to stay grounded when it doesn't go perfectly well. So thanks everybody for being here. Go lead, go empower, go delegate, and go have fun. All right, bye for now. I will talk to you soon.